Good morning. Welcome to Joy News Desk. We're coming to you live from our studios in Kokomlemle. Coming up this morning, government commits to control spending, social protection policies for the vulnerable and other structural reforms as it prepares to deliver the mid-year budget later today. We'll hear the expectations of Ghanaians. Also, military chiefs from Ghana and other West African countries begin consultations on a possible deployment of military forces to restore constitutional order in Niger. We have all of that coming up shortly on Joy News Desk. Please stay for details. Government is committed to tackling the country's economic challenges through spending control and crucial structural reforms. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, will tell us how he will achieve long-term macroeconomic stability and a positive outlook on the nation's financial health in his presentation of the much-awaited mid-year budget and economic policy review in Parliament later today. Well, government has been advised to focus on expenditure cuts. Well, I've been joined by an associate professor of finance at the University of Ghana, Professor Lord Mensah. I would also be joined by CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, Mark Bedua-Boaje, for a conversation. Let's start with you, Dr. Lord Mensah. First, we know that government says it is committed to cutting expenditure, but what's your own expectation of the mid-year budget review?
Yes, good morning to our viewers. Aisha, we cannot afford or we cannot run the economy without, cutting expenditure, i.e. looking at some discretionary lines that are non-essential and, cut them drastically. Let me emphasize on being drastic, cutting down expenditure. The reason being that as we speak, the yield curve, which determines government ability to borrow, and then also businesses' ability to borrow, is inverted, i.e., the short-term interest rates, seem to be providing more returns than the long-term, or because government reads budgets and government intention to spend is clearly, shown in the budget. Effectively tells you that government is borrowing on short term, so demand for short-term instruments has been on the higher side. And the only way government can bring down the short-term interest rate is to signal that expenditure is going to be reduced going forward. Now, anytime a yield curve is inverted, government struggles to finance its long-term policies. By so doing, government can only borrow. But look, we've been banned from I wouldn't say banned. The market has priced us out from the international market. And then looking at the domestic front, the debt restructuring has also reduced the appetite for long-term investment. So the only source of finance, whether government intends to do roads, whether government intends to provide funding for pre-SHS, probably they are using the alpha. Even that one has been reduced. Whether government will finance any of its policies, the only source of financing is, through the treasury bill market. And the cost of, using treasury bill to finance long term is generational. It's not going to terminate now. Because if you borrow, finance your budget deficit, and at a point where in 1 year time, most of the policies you're going to finance would have not started yielding the necessary cash flows to pay off the borrowing. And so as a result of that, you may have to continuously have to borrow for short term, finance long term. And so the government must signal in this budget that the demand for short term, as far as his activities is concerned, will be down so that the interest rate in the short term will come down. And that will even help the Monetary Policy Committee. But the Monetary Policy Committee has been increasing the policy rate in a way to keep the appetite on the market for government instruments. Remember, the policy rate is not just to catch up inflation alone. And with time, we will find a situation where government intention to introduce taxes, Monetary Policies Committee to intention to arrest inflation will be a stalemate, because the pass-through effect of tax increase is price increase. So one policy, which is the fiscal policy, is trying to fuel price increase, while the monetary policy will try to reduce it. So there will be a stalemate. Unless the government has found the optimum tax level, which I presume now they could feel it, that the taxes has gotten to a saturated point. To a point where if you tend to increase it, you have a tendency of, affecting businesses seriously. And so they may not want to go that line. And as a result of that, the policy rate, the policy committee's intention or mandate will be effective by reducing inflation. So from where I sit, we cannot afford to move forward to the next IMF, tranche if government does not cut, expenditure, especially on some of the key, flagship programs. I'm looking at a flagship program like an IPEP. You shouldn't even have a budget allocation because it's infrastructure for poverty, alleviation. Now, every infrastructure you provide, depending on how you spread it, has a tendency of reducing, poverty. So why would you have a budget line for program that will, target, poverty? Let's assume that you've constructed a road from, in a remote somewhere. It has a tendency of, lifting the people out of poverty. Well, roads accessibility and the externalities that comes with it has built up into economic development. So from where I sit, the government must, and then free SHS. If I did some, analysis yesterday, like research yesterday, trying to look at how much we've allocated for free SHS since 2020. And clearly, it's about 9.6 billion. And 9.6 billion going off our budget, expenditure may not necessarily, rescue the situation, but it will definitely, do something for us. Because if parents are calling for burden sharing, right, in free SHS, and as we speak now, quality has even been compromised, one way or the other. And so if parents are, calling for burden sharing, why wouldn't you share with them so that you can save maybe half of the 9.6 billion, that can go into other things for the country? So from where I sit, I think expenditure cut should be the hallmark for this, budget review. Other than that, we may not fit into the IMF program.
Mr. Bedouin Boakye, right. I'll be coming back to you, Professor Lord Mensah. Mr. Bedouin Boakye, businesses have had cause to complain of increased taxes and high costs of doing business. I would be gauging your mood on what the challenges are that you want resolved in this budget, mid-year budget review. But let's pick some sights and sounds from Parliament. Our colleague George Riafi is pitching camp there. George, what's happening in Parliament right now? Is the minister in?
Aisha, the minister is not yet in. The initial time that was advertised for this presentation was 10 a.m. But as you can see behind me, the members are still trickling in for the engagement. Earlier on, I had some engagement with one of the deputy ministers at the Finance Ministry, and they claim that they are ready and they are waiting for the House to call them in, and the minister would come and do the presentation. But as we speak right now, it is yet to start, and we are all waiting for the minister to come in.
George, what will be the focus of the mid-year budget review today? We're hearing of government's assurance of cutting down costs. We're hearing of government's assurance of improving, having structural reforms. What will be the focus of this mid-year budget review?
Well, if we want to stick to the official statement that was released by the Ministry of Finance, it's more focusing on stability and economic growth. What has come up in terms of the economic numbers and what the minister is going to do or talk about to more of achieve stability whilst transforming or growth. So that is what the Ministry of Finance, they did release an official statement ahead of this presentation to give us some insight in terms of the presentation. But again, engaging some people at the Ministry of Finance and even some government officials as well, they're looking at how can they stabilize what we have achieved so far. Again, the fact that the minister is going to give us some indications or more of data to support the claim that indeed the economy is showing some signs of recovery and stability. And so it is more of what has happened so far, what policy measures can be implemented to stabilize or more of consolidate the gains that they've made, as well as going forward, whether some growth can be achieved going forward. If you look at all the numbers that have been put out by the World Bank, the IMF, and even all the development partners, it indicates that growth would slow down within the 1% or a little above 1% range for the end of this year. So the numbers doesn't look like that good when it comes to growth, and therefore what can government do to use this mid-year review to try and maybe see how growth can be or the economy can expand going forward? And that is what we are likely to get from the Minister of Finance. Aisha, don't forget that what the minister is doing today is a requirement under the Public Financial Management Act, where it requires the minister that not later than July 31, he should appear before Parliament to update members on the fiscal numbers for the first half of this year and then going into the next half as well. Are the numbers going to be the same? Don't forget that the minister, that's this budget that is come to review, was presented last year, and that was based on data up to September last year. So them new numbers have come in, and indeed you need to update Parliament. And whether the end of year targets that were set when it comes to expenditure, when it comes to revenue, when it comes to growth as well, are they going to remain the same or they're going to change? What we are picking up is that it's likely that he will stick to the expenditure numbers as well as revenue. In terms of taxes, we are hearing that there wouldn't be any new taxes. Rather, how can he work with the existing measures that will again help the country to get more revenue? So that is what we are picking up from the ministry or from those who have knowledge of this document that he will be presenting the next few minutes or even hours, Aisha.
Is our man in Parliament. Definitely where to stick for all of that is the Joy News channel. We have all our cameras, our lenses widely open in Parliament, and we'll bring you bits and pieces of whatever happens in Parliament. Let me come back to you, Mark Bedwa-Boaje, and find out from you. For you, what are the challenges that you want addressed in this mid-year budget review?
Thank you very much, Aisha. Let me say good morning to listeners as well. I think for businesses, what we are looking for is a very conducive business environment. That is what we need for businesses to take advantage of. The challenges for me are too many, and the extent to which this budget can address these challenges is still a bit difficult to be. That notwithstanding, I think I will mention some of them. Of course, taxes is very key. Prior to the introduction of the new taxes, we had complained that, in fact, there were already so many taxes in the economy. Businesses are saddled with taxes, and those taxes are not taxes that are helpful to businesses. We call them, they are counterproductive and they are inimical to businesses. It's as if for our economy, we think that the only way we can generate revenue is through taxes. In other jurisdictions, taxes are being used as incentive to empower the private sector. Ours has been just revenue generation without looking at the impact of these taxes on businesses and also on employment and also productivity. Now, let me give you a typical example, or let me walk you through a typical tax that a business person
may pay. At the last budget, the VAT was increased to 15%. That VAT component also includes certain taxes that are straight line and directly impact on business cost of production. Our VAT system is totally different from any VAT system anywhere. We have the direct tax neutrality under the VAT, and then we have the straight line taxes. Under the normal VAT, when you pay, there is input output. So when you pay and you also receive, at the end of it, you net it off, and the excess is what you pay. Now, close to 6% of our VAT component is a direct cost. The NHIL is a direct cost to businesses. The COVID tax is there, and then the GET fund is there. These are straight line taxes or VAT that you cannot claim. So when you happen like that, you increase the cost of production of businesses, and this will also definitely impact on prices. What we are asking for is that this budget should look at merging the normal VAT and also that of the straight line VAT that we have, and also reduce it below 18%. When you combine the normal VAT and the straight line VAT, it gives you 21.9%, almost 22%. It's among the highest anywhere, and it doesn't help businesses as well. We have also complained about this COVID tax that we have in our tax structure. What is that tax basically doing? What was the purpose of instituting that tax? And is that purpose still relevant now? The WHO has clearly indicated that COVID is not a pandemic. So why would we have a COVID tax? In fact, no country in the world now is charging any COVID tax. So when you buy something, analyze the tax that you are paying, and you realize that just that component you are paying close to 22%. And that's part of it directly impacts on businesses. Now, let's come back to the corporate tax. Already it was high, 25%. It hasn't been touched, and that is fine. So when you put all these taxes and also charges and fees, now all the government agencies, one way or the other, are now autonomous. So they are also looking for ways to generate revenue. So when you go there, you pay fees and you pay charges. All this translates into cost of doing business, or increasing the cost of doing business. So already there were a number of taxes that were not helping businesses. And then they came in with these two taxes also, where we have the growth and sustainability tax, and also that of the excise levy or duty. Now, the growth and sustainability tax, I've seen Honorable Secretary in there. It's supposed to be a tax that should last, for a short period of time to solve a specific problem. This tax started long way back in 2000 when we called it National Reconstruction Levy. After serving the purpose, we kept it there. And the incidence of this tax is on businesses. And then they kept it there and then changed it to National Fiscal Stabilization Levy. And now they have rebranded it and calling it Growth and Sustainability Levy. The component of it and how it's structured, some of them also translate into direct costs to businesses. So you have some of the businesses paying 5% of their gross profit. And it's so huge. And this translates directly into cost. Some are paying 2.5%, and those in the mining sector are paying 1% of their gross production. And then you come back to the excise levy or duty, which is also being imposed on businesses, such as those in the beverage sector as well. And it means that your cost of production is also going to increase. Now, if you introduce all these taxes at a time on the back of other high cost of doing business, like electricity, since June up to this time, we've seen close to 75% increase in electricity tariffs. Water tariffs have also gone up. Inflation is on the ascendancy. It's also going up. Now we have the governor or the Bank of Ghana who thinks that the only way to solve inflation is to increase monetary policy. And consistently, we have increased monetary policy for the past 2 years. And consistently, we have seen inflation going up. And that should tell you that we cannot solve this kind of inflation only with monetary policy, but we should look at other things and also the source of the inflation that we have. Now, if you have inflation which is coming from the food sector, or inflation coming from the imported sector, You cannot solve them purely by monetary policy. So if you have food inflation going up about 50%, and you are saying that because you are going to increase monetary policy to mop up excess liquidity, where is the money? A typical business person, a typical Ghanaian will ask you that, or will tell you that there is no money. So what are they mopping? Unless they are telling us that they are the ones that supply money and they have pumped in a lot of money. Of course, we are aware of the kind of printing money they printed to finance government expenditure. If that is what they are mopping, then I think that they have overmopped. And now they have to look at the other sources. Now, if you have inflation that is also coming from imported sector, you cannot necessarily control that inflation by increasing monetary policy, because the cedi has depreciated so much that anytime you import, you are likely to see an increase in the prices. And go to the port now, the taxes and levies that you pay for an imported product, even raw materials that we are going to add value to it. We want to change the structure of the economy. People are importing raw materials to add value to it. Go and check the taxes that they are paying. Aside that, this COVID tax is still on some of them. And then you increase monetary policy by 0.5%. And I was so saddened when people say it's a marginal increase. In fact, a 0.5% increase in monetary policy is so huge. It's a cause for concern for every business person when that increment happens. And it is coming on the back of an already high monetary policy of 29.5. Since we started this inflation targeting, that is the highest. And now just the MPC policy rate is 30%. That is the minimum that any commercial bank would want to borrow from the central bank. These commercial banks are also businesses. So if they are borrowing at least at 30%, you don't expect that they will give the money to businesses at 30%. They will also add their costs, their margins, and also look at the risk profile of businesses. So interest rates now, the cost of borrowing now, is now hovering between 35 to 45% based on your risk profile, and the likelihood that it will go up is there. So you put all these things together as a business person, and you ask yourself a typical question: how am I going to produce to ensure that I make profits, I create value for my shareholders, and I'm able to keep people in employment? These questions are difficult to answer at the moment, for which reason some businesses are collapsing. If you can't borrow at 45% just for your working capital, because people are basically not expanding. If you are to pay all these taxes, these pre-production taxes, and at the end of it, the little profit that you make, go and pay corporate tax on it, how much will be left for you to say that I'm reinvesting my business to expand? Clearly, in the IMF program, it is stated that it's going to be automatic adjustment of tariffs. The likelihood that tariffs will also go up from its current level is there. Already, the cost per kilowatt hour for manufacturing company in Ghana is among the highest in the world. You are paying about 11 or 12 cents, while the Chinese are paying 1, 2, 3 cents. How do you ensure that businesses become competitive? We are also in the global market. Now we have the AFTA with us, that we have opened our borders to other goods to come in, just as they have also opened to us. What will determine our sources or the benefits that we will get from AFTA is how competitive our businesses are. And I speak to you, I can say on authority that businesses in Ghana are not competitive. So if all businesses are coming, those who are producing at a very competitive rate, they are borrowing at less than 10%, their electricity is low, their tax level are also low, and they are producing at that level, and they ship their goods in here. Even already the manufacturing companies that we have, that we are saying they are doing very well, will also collapse. In fact, by 2030, right, almost all the agreement that we have signed, almost all the trade agreements, the UK, Ghana, the EPA, the AFTA, the AGOA, and the rest, by 2030, most of the goods will come into Ghana duty-free. It means that we have to, from now, begin to empower the private sector to be competitive. So we cannot continue on this target that because of IMF, because government needs revenue, we should be imposing taxes on businesses. We will end up killing those businesses. and will not have any private sector that we can call that this private sector are the ones that are going to employ their people. Now, let's look at the expenditure side. I think it's been said severally, and we are also adding our voice to it, that you have two ways to be debt sustainable. One is your revenue side, the other side is your expenditure. Government has total control over the expenditure. If you want to spend, you know. If you have the money to spend, you know. So you can control that. We want to see how government is going to cut down its expenditure, which is very, very relevant. If government should continue to have this over-bloated expenditure and think that the only way out is to increase revenue and that they have to impose taxes on the private sector, it means our expenditure will continuously not be sustainable. I have heard over and over that our tax to GDP is among the lowest in Africa. And I keep asking, let's expand the discussion, the narratives, and go to those countries and ask a typical question of those who are supposed to pay taxes and those who are paying. If you take Ghana, out of the 15 million people and institutions that are supposed to pay taxes, only 5 million are paying. And these are the individuals that they can identify, the business that they can identify. So the easy and the laziest way to get revenue is to ensure that we are imposing taxes on these individuals day in and day out. Check what they are doing. What is the size of the tax net? Is it expanded enough to ensure that every business or every individual is paying the minimum tax that they have to pay before we can make that comparison? Another thing is that I don't know whether they add these levies and charges from this government institution, which are also very huge. So we cannot, as I said, continue like that. So we are not expecting, I think I have heard that the Ministry of Finance is saying that they are not going to introduce new taxes. I'm also adding that beyond that, they should not increase the rate for existing taxes. They have a way of also converting some of these VAT into straight line taxes that will increase the cost of production. This Get Fund and AHI, I remember 2-3 years ago, they were part of our normal VAT that you can make input output, but they were converted into these straight line taxes. That is increasing the cost of production in business. So if we want to ensure that our economy is growing, if you want to ensure that private sector is creating the needed job for us, of course, government is not employing. I mean, government cannot employ. Government just employs just 6% of the total labor force. The 94% is being employed by the private sector. So if you are crippling the private sector, then you are in a way saying that you still want the unemployment rate to go up because the number of Ghanaians are coming out of universities, millions and millions and thousands, and the jobs are not there for them. They are also not trained to create their own jobs. And of course, not every Ghanaian or every individual can be an entrepreneur. The journey for being an entrepreneur is a very difficult journey. If you have spoken to any business person quite recently about what they are going through, you have a feel of how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur in Ghana. Others decided that for this one, I cannot contain it. So I'll close down my business and then go and find somewhere to sleep. Others have left out of the country. Others have also relocated their businesses to other parts of Africa, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and the rest. I have a typical case of one of our members who was manufacturing soap and other detergents. The cost of production was just too high. He has relocated to Cote d'Ivoire, a typical Ghanaian. Not that it's a foreign company that is saying that I'm a multinational, so we have a branch there. A Ghanaian. Even though you go and you see a part of the business in here, they are virtually doing nothing. And all those who were working there have been laid off. We cannot continue like that. Let us look at how we can help businesses.
Mr. Bedwabwaja, I'm happy that you spoke about tariffs, and I know definitely how much energy affects your production. We are hearing that government will be heavy on energy in the mid-year budget review. I'll come back to you to find out what exactly you want to hear in terms of power generation. But Dr. Lord Mensah, government says it intends to also tackle the economic challenges through crucial structural reforms. Which kind of reforms are we talking about here? What do you want to hear?
Yeah, so I think in the IMF program, clearly government has indicated that they may go on reduction in capex, and which they indicated on non-essential capital expenditure being taken care of as far as the capex is concerned. And then also goods and services, I think it made mention of the leakages that needs to be blocked so that we can have, that kind of efficiency in terms of what is being spent and the outcome of the expenditures that we are doing. So basically, these are the reforms that I'm expecting from the budget. But then also, if you look at the program, the system as we speak now, calls for external, input or external funding, which we have been banned from. We've been priced out of the international market, and so the innovative way, which was indicated in the program, was to engage the private sector, not necessarily, the Ghanaian private sector, possibly looking at the international, investors, FDIs, and then making sure that they come and, invest in Ghana by touching on some salient, sectors of the economy. And an example was given by selling off some of our debts to, friendly countries who are interested in our environment. And I may want to see, how far we've gone with that. Whether some engagements have been done, as far as these structures are concerned. So basically, that is what I'm expecting from, the budget.
Minister Seth Terkper has also joined us. Mr. Terkper, I'm grateful for your time. You've heard from Mark Bedua-Boadjeh. He represents the Chamber of Commerce and Industries. He's speaking about how taxes and more taxes are collapsing the industry. For you, ideally, what should be the situation where government gets its revenue and at the same time businesses thrive? Hello, Mr. Terkper? Right.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me now?
Great, loud and clear, I can hear you.
Yes, good morning to your viewers and to colleagues who are on the show. I heard Mark, clearly as I came in, and that was a lecture. That was, I think, government should be listening. What do I expect from the budget? Now, we are meeting a legal requirement. The media review didn't used to be compulsory. It was made compulsory in the PFMA. So the first point is we want to know, in line with the law, the Public Financial Management Act, how government has performed since the preparation of the last budget. That is the main thing, the essence of the media review. It is not a question of whether you are going to ask for money or not. That used to be what was done in the past. This is a public financial management best practice that was put in the PFMA, the new act. It's supposed to tell us where are we on the macro, where are we on the budget, and that budget, what are its implications for the medium term. So that's the first thing that I expect, the minister to do. The medium term, incidentally, overlaps with the IMF program, 3 years. Our medium term is current year plus 3 years. So the two things are clearly overlapping now. And therefore, what I also expect is an update of where we are with the program. I think Professor Rodmeza mentioned some of them. Where are we in terms of the domestic debt exchange? Where are we in terms of the external debt exchange? And how far, because these were prior actions to even going to the board. So we got waivers for this. What is our preparation for the media review? For the IMF review, that is first review that's going to happen in September. That is, we have only August, between us. And that is critical because that is supposed to bring another injection into the economy. It was supposed to be November. Now, how are these two things, the mid-year review and the IMF's review, preparing us for the budget itself? The last budget, which is 2024 budget. Next year, there will be just expenditure and advance of appropriation. So this year's budget is very critical. So how are these two things preparing us towards the end of the year and meeting certain timelines and targets? Now, to be specific, what we need to do is structural. You see, when we do IMF programs, it is basically for correction. It is basically for correction. And that is because you have been hit by, let's say, global financial crisis, by your own drought, and by various, factors. The situation we are in now, and then, in that context, you want to do an element of structural, which is the last program before this one was heavily focused on energy because we had Temfield, Sankofa, and others coming in, and therefore you would have heard terms like the partial risk guarantee and other things. So the structure was basically on, the energy sector and how to resolve debt, which is where the public sector debt, particularly the subsidy-related ones, which is where ESLA, came in, which we should have used to clear the energy sector debt, which was accumulated up to 2016. Okay, so, but in doing this, therefore, it is holistic. So what I do expect, thirdly, is that this budget will tackle revenue. Mark mentioned a lot of it already. As he said, what is straight levy? Straight levy was part of, VAT, National Health Insurance and Get Fund. Now, the critical point about removing them from the VAT as elements of the VAT is that, you see, VAT is a tax on the consumer. It's not a tax on business. And that is why the VAT allows businesses that are registered who paid the VAT on their inputs to get either a credit or a refund. So what a business pays for VAT is the net. It is net of the VAT that they charge and net of the VAT that they paid on inputs. So until the goods are sold, finished and sold, or imported and sold to the final consumer or to a non-registered business, all input taxes are being claimed. So when you convert them to straight levy, and we said this immediately this straight levy was done, and you deny businesses the right of paying, or the right of the refund or the credit, which is a feature of VAT, on their inputs, they'll add it to cost. And then in addition, we added, as we speak, Aisha, we have about 13 levies, including some which Mark mentioned. We should have gone away. We use them since the Rawlings era, since structural adjustment program, as part of correction. And there were normally two main ones, fiscal stabilization levy and temporary, import duty. These were the two. And even they were imposed selectively on selective goods and then also on the sectors that are likely to benefit, even though you are in a difficulty. A good example is Zoom came up, MTN came up because countries were locked down, so electronic taxation became a factor. Even the e-levy, we had argued, should be temporary. Why? Because it is part of the base of VAT already. Aisha, when we introduced the VAT, right, and I'm just doing some research on it, we eliminated, not apart from the sales tax itself, which was replaced by VAT, we eliminated levies or other taxes numbering about 15 and included them in the VAT. So what are we doing? Are we not going back to the Kumi Preku era, by imposing 13 levies, most of which were replaced by the VAT? So one, we need to look, as Mark said, at the tax structure, direct and indirect, because we are entering into a very competitive era, as indicated. Direct taxes, we had said, in fact, there was a target. They used to be 55%, 65%. those who know the ERP, pre-ERP SAP era. So if we were at a 0.25%, as of 2016, it has taken us 3 decades. It has taken 3 decades to reduce the tax rate, corporate income tax and personal income tax rate from those levels to 25%. Today, we've added 10% to 30 and then to 35. Now, even if upon all this we are generating the revenue, but if you go back to 2015, or let's go back to 2013, when the new rebasing was done, our tax rate has been flat. In fact, both the tax to GDP and revenue to GDP the highest was 2015, despite all these taxes that we have, reintroduced. So it means that, the taxes have become so burdensome, evasion and avoidance have become high. We are not even realizing the benefit of it. It's only the 2021 that we're supposed to. Next, we have to tackle expenditure. Aisha, we are sitting on 77 billion Ghana cedis of contracts that were awarded and supplies that were made to government. This was at the end of 2021. We were told that 24 billion has been paid, right? Or was paid at the time. If you take it for granted, that leaves us about 50 billion. Now, this has declined. This has declined to, by 37 billion. Now, was it paid? It might seem as if it's an expenditure that was paid. No. That amount, read the IMF program, read the debt sustainability analysis, it has been added to debt. So it's part of the debt restructuring. Has any engagement been made, with the energy sector? I believe that is the issue of the IPPs in plain language. If you put one and one together, some of those debt has now been bundled and is supposed to be part of the debt exchange. We have had a situation with expenditure to the point where Bank of Ghana today is virtually bankrupt. Bank of Ghana was financing the entire deficit and more. If Bank of Ghana provided 40 billion, to government, and your deficit was 37 billion, it means Bank of Ghana was bankrolling virtually the entire, deficit. Why? Because we had been locked out of, the markets, as Professor Lord Mercer said. And so we couldn't borrow. So today we are relying on only, treasury bills, basically, and then whatever revenue is coming or loans are coming from the multilaterals, that is World Bank, IMF, nobody else is giving us, any form of. So why do you keep expenditure high when you cannot borrow? And by relying on only treasury bills, you are increasing the cost of borrowing. That's one of the reasons why interest rate is going up. Excuse me. It's one of the reasons why interest rate is going up, as much, because we are back to what economists call crowding. Government is crowding out the private sector because both of them are lending for the banking sector, and the banking sector may find it profitable giving their money to government. No matter how bad the situation is for government, one day taxes will come. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if you take the arrears which I mentioned across all sectors, we know education, we know health, we know it's across all sectors. If you take again, the fact that government is finding it difficult to pay these arrears, it tells you that government cannot even pay past arrears, let alone new initiatives. So every sector is going to be touched. And that's why I'm saying that I expect these budgets to go into a structural mode. When we do IMF programs, normally the structural element is secondary. Now it has to be primary because the economy has gone into a very dire, situation. And in the last segment, which I participated in, as Professor Theo Achampo suggested, which I agree, it will take us about 3 years to normalize the situation in which we are now, because that's how long it takes us, to bring stability back, when we do the normal austerity programs, with the IMF. So this would be, by way of my, but sorry, let me jump to one quick point. The relationship between Bank of Ghana, and the central bank is something that needs to be critically examined. The Bank of Ghana finances government, and then we are told that the same Bank of Ghana is writing off. After the bank has depleted our reserves to finance government, right? The same Bank of Ghana is now writing off 37 billion of debt owed to government. Where is it going to replace the money? Because remember, Bank of Ghana, is keeping those reserves to manage the economy, to manage government finances. And then in the case of the forex element, which is depleted, we were told to about half a month, it uses that money to support imports and to support the forex side of the economy. Much of this has been depleted. And we are being told that they are being written off just on paper. It means a lack of fiscal responsibility, right? And even COVID, the point has been made, about the levy. But remember that we got up to $6 billion US, I'm not talking cities or so, to resolve COVID.
Yep.
Right? Even when we had deeper problems, all we got to do a correction was 1 billion. And the highest now is 3 billion for a correction. So what happened to all those sums of money? Of course, the Auditor General's reports and other things are there. So if I may look forward, I'm looking to revenue reforms, which started under Professor Mills with the creation of GRA, measure of IRS and VAT to reduce compliance costs and administration costs for both business and GRA. I'm looking to, consolidating ICOMS, which used to be West Blue or single window. Those initiatives we had, that was phase one. Phase two was supposed to be the automation of domestic, businesses. Domestic tax administration, which was stopped to date. It has become a condition in the IMF program. An initiative that we started has now become a condition for us to fulfill, right? We must go back to GIFMIS and stop spending outside the GIFMIS, because every government account inflow and outflow is supposed to go through the Controller General. That is the essence of GIFMIS. Today, we are being told that was an initiative. It wasn't imposed on us by the front. I'm talking about Ghana. I'm not talking partisan now. That was an initiative because these things were debated, right? We have gone back, and now it has become a condition of GIFMIS is global. So we are being asked now as a condition in the IMF program.
So that is something that we should go back to. Briefly, let me bring Mark Bedwa-Boagye before I wrap up this conversation on the energy bit. We spoke about how power generation affects your business. What's in it, or what should be in it for you as far as power generation and supply is concerned, Mr. Bedwa-Boagye?
Well, thank you very much. For every business, energy is very key. It must be a reliable supply of energy, and also affordability is also key. So if you are supplying energy and businesses cannot afford, then definitely it comes back to nothing. In fact, if you take a typical manufacturing company, 30% of the cost of that manufacturing company is energy, electricity related. So any increments, a little bit of it will actually affect the cost. In fact, we have seen that the supply of energy is now reliable, so that is key. But we are also much concerned about the cost of it. But if we were to increase, you're talking about cost recovery, and if you have stopped playing politics with our energy system, we were to increase it bit by bit, we wouldn't have had the impact that it's having on businesses now. But for you to wait for a period of time and then within 6 months, you increase it by 75%, definitely it will be harsh on businesses. Energy is key. The other alternative from this national grid is for you to buy your own generator and get fuel. Now go and check the cost of fuel. It's also high. So we are caught between very difficult situations that I think is not giving relief to businesses. So previously, if you look at the increment, we have two ways. We have the main increment, tariff increment, and also the quarterly adjustment. The quarterly adjustment was supposed to be 1%, 2%, maximum 3%. Now you realize that the quarterly adjustment is even bigger or higher than the main adjustment. So we have a quarterly adjustment of 18 to 20%. All this is fit into the cost of production. So once they are looking at reliability, they also look at affordability and also look at how they can bring relief to businesses. Until recently, businesses were rather subsidizing for households. And that, I mean, in other countries, it doesn't happen that way. It's rather the reverse. So you have households who, for the sake that they want businesses to expand, to employ more people, who pay more to support the businesses. Now ours was in the reverse, but they have changed it, which is very good. But let's look at the reliability and affordability.
I'm grateful for your time, Mark Bedu Aboagye, CEO of Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Dr. Mr. Sir Tekpe is former Minister for Finance, and Professor Lord Mensah is an Associate Professor of Finance with the University of Ghana Business School. Grateful that you all joined us. Let's take a break on Joy News Desk. We'll be back shortly. And welcome back to Joy News Desk, and also our special edition of the mid-year budget. Finance Minister himself told Ghanaians that the DDEP has really generated or helped improve the economy. What's in it for the ordinary Ghanaian who only knows about, food prices that should be low, tariffs, electricity and water tariffs that should be low, and some money into their pockets? What's in it for the ordinary Ghanaian? All of that Evans Mensah and his team will be talking about. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of our programs.